Good day, Zach Lindquist here, otherwise known as the Ben Shapiro you got on Wish.com, to bring up an important question. What is the big deal with pornography? I make a big enough fuss over it in my book and in my conversations. What's my problem, right? I mean, who does porn really hurt? Why do I wish so fervently to see this Goliath industry of dehumanization crumble in my lifetime? And yes, I really mean that, but it's as harmless advice as one can have, isn't it? I mean, can't I just leave this one seemingly minor issue alone and let people do whatever the heck they want behind closed doors without even a modicum of shame? I mean, it's not like anybody's being victimized here, is it? Well, the truth is that we often convince ourselves that, well, as does the world more broadly, that when we go against God and do wrong, we convince ourselves that we either know the potential consequences of our actions and we think that the risks are clear, or we convince ourselves that what we're doing wrong is no big deal so long as we perceive that nobody's being hurt. But we're always wrong. We never know the full extent of the ripple effect that our actions will cause, the impact, who will be affected, or to what extent they will be affected. We never know the whole picture. Now, whether we perceive them or not, the consequences are there, right? This applies to all things concerning sexual morality. Pornography and masturbation, certainly no exceptions to this rule. The problems with porn and masturbation are easy enough to understand, but it is increasingly difficult for the average individual to accept them. We live in a culture that prioritizes lust over love and pleasure over affection, and under such conditions, it can be hard for people to accept facts that may stand in the way of their appetites being fulfilled. Now, the culture, by and large, seeks to justify this pursuit of appetite and immediate gratification in a rather subtle, clever, sneaky way. They do this by classifying sexual release as a need. Now, to be clear, a need is something that your body requires in order to survive, right? You need to breathe air or you will suffocate and die. You need to drink water or you will die of thirst. You need to eat food or you will die of starvation. You need shelter from the elements or you will die of exposure, and you need to sleep or your body will eventually shut down and you may very well die. Now, you may want a sexual release sometimes as badly as you want a cold glass of water after 24 hours in the Sahara Desert sun, but if you do not get that sexual release, you will not die. Okay, I promise you, the epitaph on your tombstone will never read, cause of death, sexual frustration. Okay, that has never happened in the history of humanity. You are safe from that particular doom. Now, if anyone tells you that viewing porn and masturbating are not morally wrong, but are in fact somehow healthy for you and for society, then there are two possibilities there. They're either misguided or they are lying to you, probably because they are addicted to the stuff and they seek to justify its use.
Ouch.
And look, there's no way I can cover every problem with pornography in a short video. There's actually a reason that this topic covers the single longest chapter in my book. But I will do my best to give a brief crash course on the dangers of porn, if nothing else but to put a stone in your shoe, give you something to think about, and encourage you to drop the habit if it's one that you happen to have. If you want further information on the topic than what I can fit into this brief overview, then feel free to check out my book, Back to the Basics of Love, A Single Christian's Guide to Dating, Sex, and Morality in a Secular World. Now, if I could single out you men out there for a moment, if I were to ask you if you would like to be married someday, many, if not most of you, would probably answer yes, which is great. Marriage is a wonderful thing. It's a very noble pursuit, and it's a very selfless pursuit if you do it right. And a number of you watching are probably married already, so congratulations. But when you are married to your beautiful, wonderful, one-of-a-kind wife, it will be your job to make her feel safe, valued, desired, and loved. And if that is indeed your goal as a man, as it should be, then I have to ask, why would you want to subject yourself to something that, by its very nature, teaches you to view women as tools for your gratification rather than as infinitely valuable human beings who should be loved, cherished, and respected?
He's got a point.
Now, porn teaches men to seek self-gratification above all else, both because that is what they are seeing happening on the computer screen and because that is what they are doing themselves when they are engaging in the accompanying activity. They are teaching themselves subconsciously that women are to be used for pleasure and then discarded at the proverbial turn of a page. They are teaching themselves to fantasize wildly and become aroused by seeing perverse forms of sexual activity that could never be mistaken for loving acts. They are conditioning their minds to detach sex from love, making the two seem mutually exclusive. And where intercourse should be affectionate and caring, the porn user detaches those elements completely and replaces them with lust and the taboo. Now, through a man's use of porn and masturbation, the neurons in his brain will inevitably form synapses, which link sexual acts to the self, his own self, and link the image of a woman to nothing more than his own pleasure. And if he does this repeatedly, viewing a plethora of pornographic images with a sea of different women, another synapse forms in his brain, which links women with the words disposable or replaceable. The porn-hooked mind is no longer one which sees a woman as a uniquely beautiful human being with her own thoughts, desires, aspirations, and experiences. Note to the porn-filled mind, she is nothing above the value of a toy, which is grotesque to say the least. Now, women are no more immune to these brain games than men are, although it tends to manifest differently in women than it does in men. See, it's been observed that women who get hooked on pornography not only begin to view members of the opposite sex, other people, with a less humanizing lens, but that women actually begin to view themselves as less valuable. They see how women are portrayed in porn as mere bodies and begin to associate themselves with the same portrayal. Not only does porn teach women that sex is some kind of essentially meaningless yet demoralizing act, which is a destructive mindset in and of itself, but they begin on some level to see their own selves in a demoralized way. If in the woman's mind, sex is only a means of pleasing oneself, she begins to view her body as a tool for such things. And she mentally begins to separate the body from the self. And if she devalues her body, she devalues herself by extension, whether she realizes it or not. The two are inseparable. If she sees one, the body, as meaningless, then she will devalue the other, herself, the self, as well. And the end result, of course, is a loss of personal identity, a waning sense of dignity, and a surge in depression. A woman who dehumanizes herself may begin to feel more isolated and lonely, in which case she may seek comfort and value through acts of physical human contact. She may find herself looking for attention and affection in all the wrong places, and if she has little value in herself or in her body, you can probably imagine where that might lead her. Porn is degrading by its very nature, and it becomes more taboo and grotesque every day. The more young people, male or female, are exposed to it, the more they begin to associate sex, which is supposed to be a loving act between lifelong spouses, with demeaning and harmful practices. And such an association leads to more and more men pressuring women into weird and uncomfortable situations, and more women allowing themselves to be used in horrible ways, because it is what they come to expect and accept as the norm. Now, we haven't even scratched the surface of the consequences, the nightmarish consequences, mind you, of pornography and masturbation. And I will refer you to the warning at the beginning of the video, because we're going to get a little bit graphic here for a moment. But there are also many physiological problems that arise from porn and masturbation, including but not limited to sexual dysfunction. Now, think about it. Muscle memory is in fact a thing. Our bodies learn from what we do with them. They have a memory. They learn to respond to the things that we teach them to respond to. This is true of physical exercise, of weightlifting, of motor skills, both simple and complicated. The human body will learn to respond the way it is taught when it comes to something like masturbation as well. When one stimulates his sexual organs by using his hands, his body will learn to respond to that particular form of stimulation, something it was not designed for. And when that same individual tries to be intimate with a flesh and blood woman at some point, after so training his body to respond to a more dull, bland form of stimulation, how do you think his body is going to respond in a moment of actual intimacy? Well, there are two likelihoods. Likelihood number one is that the body won't respond at all to real sex, because it was so trained to respond to a hand. Right? It wasn't trained for that form of stimulation, for the real form of stimulation. Possibility number two is that the man would have so trained and conditioned himself for immediate gratification, immediate release, that he has chronic pre-ejaculation. He can't last for seconds because he has so trained himself to be gratified and released immediately. That's number two. If one trains his body with masturbation, it will not respond properly to real intimacy. It would be like training to run the 5K and expecting to win the gold medal at the pole vault. Okay, if you train your body a certain way, the wrong way, it will respond accordingly. Now, this is not hypothetical. Men as young as 18 years old are experiencing erectile dysfunction in droves. And this is a condition that is supposed to affect only really old men, okay? This is not supposed to be a young man's problem, barring some kind of rare underlying health issue, okay? And in addition to this, there are all too many young men who would sincerely rather watch porn and masturbate than be with a real woman. This is a real problem that people are having. Even married couples are having this problem. Right? Stats have actually shown that the current generation of young adults are having far less premarital sex on average than previous generations over the last like 4 or 5 decades. And I wish that I would think this was good news on a sexual morality front, but I wish that this was because they were all saving themselves for marriage, but that is not what is happening here. I wish it was. No, it's because these young people have become so accustomed to the immediate gratification that pornography offers, that they would rather avoid going through the effort of making a real human connection and instead lock themselves in a dark room with a laptop. Flesh and blood women are being replaced with fantasy magazine pages, computer screens, and 5 fingers for many young men, and many of the rest of these men would rather use these women as though they were not human beings. Now, this is the double-edged sword of porn. It makes some men completely disinterested in real women, and it makes others want to abuse them. Again, I will reiterate, I am barely scratching the surface here. Okay, I don't have time to tell you everything that is wrong with pornography and every way it destroys lives. That's why I wrote a book on the topic, because I had more time to go into detail there. But I will leave you with a little bit of good news. Our bodies, as well as our minds, were designed by our Creator to heal. We actually have a very miraculous ability in that regard. If you kick a bad habit cold turkey today, your body will and can return to normal after a period of time. It might take 6 months, it might take longer, it might take up to a year, but quitting a bad habit, healing can occur. It does occur. This is true of smokers, of drug addicts. If you kick the bad habit, a year from now, you can be functioning perfectly normally. Now, if you commit to putting good things in your mind, such as scripture and prayer, your mind can heal as well, out with the old and with the new, that sort of thing. Now, it is always better to never have picked up the bad habit to begin with. That is always going to be true. A lifelong smoker, somebody who used to chain smoke, while they were smoking, they were killing the alveoli in their lungs, the oxygen-carrying sacs, right? Those will never grow back for the one who quit smoking. So their lung capacity will never be what it once was, what it once could have been. But their lungs will function normally for the most part. They will have healed. But there will always be scars. That is, you can't unscramble an egg, right? But healing can and does occur. And of course, after one kicks an addiction, there's always going to be the temptation. There's going to be the potential temptation to return to the old habits. That's something that anybody who's ever been an addict will have to deal with. But God can and will walk through us in these things. By His grace, we're healed as well as forgiven. And all the same, it is better to never have picked up a bad habit and gone down the damaging path to begin with, but it is what it is, right? It is best that we, as individuals, as a society, reject pornography and allow the industry to die. Now, I can live with it dying slowly and painfully, but it still needs to die nonetheless. For the good of ourselves, for the good of our world, for the good of our children. Pornography. Bad for you, bad for America. If you would like to know more about this topic, or of other issues surrounding sexual morality and why the rules exist, feel free to check out my book, Back to the Basics of Love, A Single Christian's Guide to Dating, Sex, and Morality in a Secular World. I can always do with selling more copies. I sincerely believe in this book and its importance. I would not have written it otherwise, and I can assure you I am a better author than I am a YouTuber. I have a lot more experience in that area. If you appreciated what you heard, don't forget to like, share, and of course, subscribe. It would really help me out immensely. You can also find me on Rumble, Twitter, and Facebook. And of course, if you absolutely hated what you heard, don't forget to leave your vitriolic comment down below. Looking at you, Reddit crowd. After making a video like this, I could always do with a good laugh. But please be sure to leave out any vulgar language. Keep it clean. Anything gratuitous and nasty will be promptly deleted. Thank you so much for your time, and God bless.